Welcome in 365 Sports. Paul Catalina here in the home studio. This is the, in case you're watching us for the first time, this is the original 365 Sports studio when we started in April of 2020. So occasionally we go back to the original studio and welcome in Jack Easterby. Jack, your career is very, very interesting to me in that, you were in college athletics, you went to the NFL, chaplain, player personnel. You had a lot of different jobs, character coach. There's a lot of different things. And now you are moving kind of back into the college space when it comes to name, image, and likeness. What kind of sets you on this path back to college athletics?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me on, and excited about 25. I think that, I grew up just like most people who play sports, right? You want to be a part of sports in any way you can. And when your career runs out, for me, I wasn't a very gifted athlete. I did play 2 sports in college, but when my eligibility was up, it was time to quit. So I had to find another way to be a part of a team. And so I was really blessed. Dave Odom at the University of South Carolina kind of made a role for me. He had kind of a situation where he needed, basically a study hall guy to travel with the team and help the team travel and go through the different logistics of the year. And so he built a program through his camps where he basically had me run his summer camps and then run study hall, and basically made a position that was really student athlete services before that was popular. And then he funded it through the athletic department eventually, and then they called that position character coach. So I was really fortunate growing up at Columbia, South Carolina, to have a major university right there, right? With the University of South Carolina, the SEC was booming. And so I came back from college and started my career in a unique way, like you said, but have been so fortunate to see so many different things across the board, like whether it's obviously when cost of attendance first started, right, and how to compensate athletics, or the growth of these conferences and the amazing work of these commissioners, and then interviewing athletes as they transition from the NCAA to the NFL and watching them, acquiesce into the cultures of these different clubs over the years. It's been a really cool journey. And I think that where college is right now, it's a little bit of an identity crisis, right? And I'm sure we'll get into it. I think the question becomes, for me, the skill set I've been blessed with, and then for others, the skill sets they've been blessed with, where do they best fit? And I think it's all kind of reconfiguring itself. And so, we, just like almost everybody, our family, just like most sports leaders, are leaning into that to research and find where's the best place to fit, and, how can we best make a difference?
Yeah, I think one of the problems the NCAA has right now is they have just enough people probably still in charge at the president level that think it's going to go back if they just find that right judge to be like, it's not at all. Like, the train has left the station. If you're still sitting there waiting, there's not another one coming. The last train's out. And you have a unique experience in this, because not only on the player development emotional side, which you were a lot on, spiritual and emotional and all that, but you were in personnel. Like, you did work in personnel in the league, which this is going to have to get more like that. It's going to have to be not this. It can't be exactly the same, but it has to have some of the, there's got to be a Venn diagram, right? That things overlap. So you have a little bit of a unique look on, okay, this is what you need to do. These are financial literacy things. I heard Deion Sanders talking about this at the Alamo Bowl press conference about, look, if you're a student athlete, like that freshman year experience class that everybody takes at school, maybe throw that one out and give everybody financial literacy. Because, look, I know when I had my first real college job, I worked at Target. I know it's going to shock you to look at me and say this, but most of that paycheck went to beer and not to like the other things. I blame the social pressures of Tallahassee, Florida, but still, Like, those are the things you need to know. And that was what, $725 I made for working at a week at, Target, as opposed to maybe 725,000 or more that somebody's going to hand me and go, hey, here's money. Be smart. Congratulations, teenager.
That's right. And I would say this really, the way that I've looked at this and studied this over the last, let's call it 6 months, really looking at the trends and understanding the different kind of big rocks, let's say, in the jar, is this is really going back to early, like 16, 17 years old, right? Where these student athletes now are being given the opportunity to really formulate their circles, their pathways, their desired locations, their desired, where they want to live, all the different people that will be around them. That's really going to start even earlier than ever, right? So we're talking about age 16, 17, 18. They're going to have these things vetted. I told this story a lot, and I think it's so real. I can't tell you how many people I saw in the National Football League or in other places that got to the NFL and had to reconfigure their structure of their circle around making money, being successful, relocating into the town of their pro team, and then that didn't go well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody let them down, or somebody they thought was going to help them didn't. And so in a lot of ways, even though the rules are uncodified for the current environment, and that's frustrating, I'm sure, to the leaders, that actual inner circle and the structure of the student athlete is now going to be forced to be built at 16, 17, 18 years old. And what that's going to do is help the reps of how that person develops themselves as a professional, both within their circle and within the building, so that hopefully the performance and or the other things actually get better quicker. So I think you're going to see there's a lot of challenges. I don't want to demean those by any ways. But I do want to say, I do think there's going to be some good things come from this. You're going to see kids, 18, 19, 20 years old be more professional in how they carry themselves and their understanding of their own market value, the understanding of how they align with certain brands, cities, awareness, maybe causes that they want to bring light to, instead of 23 years old relocating to a pro city and then having to hope that they got it right.
Yeah, one of the things I think is really unique about this is not just about the guys like Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward, who Cam Ward left Wazoo last year, rolled into Miami, and you've got Rick Ross and like all these guys that like are throwing big NIL dollars. But it's like a situation. Texas Tech has this. A lot of schools have this where the collectives is set up like, look, you're going to make $37,000 if you're on the roster, and then any NIL you make after that is kind of based on your overall popularity and worth and market value. And if I had $37,000 room and board paid for the whole time, there's some financial literacy that could go on in there. Be like, look, you probably only have to spend about $3,000 of your own money a year if you're smart about it, and you can put the rest into a high yield savings or something like that. Like those are big things I think that a lot of students probably don't know, especially ones that don't come from families that, have a lot of financial literacy or live paycheck to paycheck. So they've never even considered it before, right?
And think about this too, all of the Rolodex of these people that, let's say, the student athlete today is able to meet, right? From production meetings to the communication with the local media, obviously the communication, like you said, with some of the financial institutions, right? Whether it's people that are managing their money or people potentially that may be educating them on how to manage their money. I mean, really, one of the coolest things that's going to come out of this is, even if you don't play in the NFL, if you don't play professional football, which obviously we know there's only 7 rounds plus obviously a post-draft kind of cobbled together set of free agents that'll actually acquiesce into the NFL. But, there's a huge pool of people, right, that will finish college football, that will have a head start, and for that matter, other college sports, right, that are paid. They will transition into the workforce with a little bit of a nest egg, a great awareness of the business of sport, and then probably a pretty good Rolodex of people they've interacted with during their college career, which will result in them hopefully being able to be impactors maybe on the sports business scene, as a career. And so not only will I think the financial implication, which has obviously been well documented, be, I think, impactful. I think the sports business world is getting ready to get, let's just call it thousands and thousands of professionals who understand the ins and outs of these industries every year, who graduate anticipating to be a part of this business.
What would you say the biggest thing that, I mean, we've talked about from the athlete side of it, from the leadership side of it, the university side on down, needs to embrace and put out for athletes? Because again, you could go to an institution that's embraced it, that said this is how it's going to be and do this, or you could go to one that is not there yet, so uniformly a lot of this stuff has to come from the top. So leadership on down, what do you think is the most important thing for them to educate the student athletes on?
Well, I think there's two kind of challenges here. One would be obviously what's going on in our leadership of sports in America today. And I think that's really on Congress. I think Congress has got to step up and have some semblance of a set of rules that everyone can depend on them for, right? These are not-for-profit institutions that have been chartered mostly to educate the people of a certain area of our country. And so the mission of that organization, right, has surely diversified over the last several hundred years. That now when you see the massive implications of football and other sports and the impact that it has on the state economy, the regional economy, and obviously the people within those, institutions. So I think, the people in the legislative branch of our country, they have got to lean in and understand that we've got to make some rules to help these people out, right? I think that's probably the looming piece of this that nobody really wants to talk about, but it's just got to happen, because if not, no matter what the person at the institution does, they're on a treadmill, because they're going to have to change each time a new set of legislation comes down. So we need a format that says this is kind of the lens in which we're going to view the profitability of college sports. But I think, secondly, if you're at the institution, I think it's incumbent upon you to have a communication directly with your student athletes about what that institution does to separate itself for that person's whole entire life, right? Not just for that moment. I think there's going to be lots of, money thrown at athletes for their services for 6 to 8 months. With 2 transfer portal windows, right? You're really talking about a half a year contract on a lot of this stuff, where basically after a half a year, everything's being rethought, right? And so the institution, if I was, at an institution that is trying to communicate to recruits and to families and parents, hey, we want to bring your son or daughter to our institution, I think it starts with the ability to separate that institution from other institutions over the course of the athlete's entire life. So, hey, right now we may be plus or minus this other offer you have, but the idea is we want to give life skills and advance your entire life, and not just give you, $10,000 more than our neighbor institution, or 10,000 less than our neighbor institution. So there needs to be a huge, really folder of those types of conversations that need to happen between the institutions and the recruits, so that the continuity of the institutions can matter and the growing of the people can matter. Because right now, obviously, it's just a business deal. And I think the higher ed piece of this needs to come back a little bit more into play, so that you really are educating these young people when they transition into school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're still going to be student athletes. Like, the path of which you are, I think the darkest timeline of this has, well, these guys are just employees of the university in our marketing sense now, and they're not student athletes. I don't think that that's good for anybody, because in that regard,
the student athletes have said they don't want it, right? I mean,
they don't want that.
You've heard lots of these commissioners step up and say, hey, listen, they're telling us they don't want to be employees, which I think is accurate. And also, and frankly, if you look at the market value across the board, right, the student athlete who goes to Northwestern or Southern Cal or some of the bigger number institutions that also have a high athletic profile, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in education being allocated to those student athletes. So there's an ROI component that will be added, but for sure, most athletes in the current environment have echoed the sentiment that they don't want to be employees, which I think is fair and accurate.
Yeah, I think there's a way, and like part of it is we just need some good old fashioned, American innovation on this of what is a student athlete, what is an employee, and where can you separate them and where can you join them as far as collectively bargaining goes? Because that way, and again, this is also rules that Congress can set, because if you let your kids run around without, like, you make your own rules, your house is going to get wrecked, right?
Yes.
Well, you can't do that. That's why you're there. That's why Congress is the parents. That they're supposed to be like, look, we want you to be able to do what you want to do, but we can't just let you make your own rules. And that's where it needs to come into where you can find something that's bargained, regulated, and in between, to where everybody wins in some regard, but nobody wins straight up and down. It's fair.
Yeah, and I was going to say this, and I'll be curious your thoughts on this, because there's two kind of precedents that are at different, in different sectors that I think were probably onto something. Okay, and I would be curious your thought on this, but also talking through it at large. I would say the first one was when the Player Impact Program was introduced from the PGA Tour. They introduced essentially the mentions, the likes, all of the different social impacts, and then also the appearances that every PGA Tour player, participated in, as a way to subsidize the non-earned dollars from the PGA Tour, right? So there was a year, I think you remember, maybe 2020 or 19, where Tiger Woods won it, but he hardly ever, played the whole year.
Yeah.
But that algorithm was built to show the impact that the golfers had on the tour's profitability, right? It was a direct correlation between, the name, image, and likeness idea was put into an algorithm, and they used it to say, hey, if you're selling video games, if you're obviously selling jerseys and T-shirts and these types of things, we're going to return that money to you directly from the profits of the PGA Tour, right? So to me, that idea conceptually from an algorithm standpoint, Travis Hunter probably should make more, right, than the 8th wide receiver at, an FBS school, right? So I would say that idea, that player impact idea, was a great precedent. And then the other thing that happened when the NCAA started doing cost of attendance was that they began with cost of living and other things in place with each state and each area to basically offset the expense that each student athlete occurs, right? And so then there was a lot of communication between local governments and in universities to make sure they got that number right, and every student athlete left without being hurt, basically financially, based on that. So if you raise that number up and then you come to some semblance of that PGA Tour impact program, that XY analysis to me could probably get you in some, again, facsimile of the end result of what everybody's looking for. So that if you're trending and you're producing and you have a great year, you obviously should be rewarded for that. And in the end, obviously, we don't know who that's going to be. So it's very difficult to put all the stake on that. You need to guarantee some sum of money for every athlete who walks on campus. And so to me, those are different precedents, different, obviously, worlds. But both of those had enough teeth in them, to me, to create some futuristic model based on both of them.
Yeah, there's that Venn diagram I was talking about earlier. That's what overlaps. That's where you can get something. I really do like those two examples. And I can tell you at Baylor, the big mistake that Dave Aranda made was he told us this, and it was kind of funny to hear him say it, but he had this idealistic view of it where everybody's going to be the same. Well, I mean, that's not like how it works in sports. Patrick Mahomes makes more than Justin Watson. That's
right.
How it works. And so sometimes you do need to create some incentives so that those guys that are the plus guys, come in there. Now, if everybody's taken care of, most people understand, like, look, I'm not Mahomes. Like, I'm not getting that contract. But if I can be here and help, I'm going to do well for myself. And if you're one of those dudes who thinks you're worth as much as the superstar and you're not going to do well in a team concept in any walk of your life. So this is probably a temporary thing for you. That's what I've kind of always believed. But if you do intercept those concepts together, then you have an incentive for, hey, I am popular, whether I'm a good player or it's my personality. That's the other thing I think that gets lost in this. There's a lot of guys who just have great personality and
That's
have
right.
followings on social media and they can make money off of that. So if I want to buy a jersey of the nose guard who's just funny, then I can do that, and that's something else because that wasn't really there before.
That's right. And let's be honest, like you said about the Chiefs example there, I think that when you're talking about the projection of a college athlete from high school to college versus obviously from college to the NFL, there's a huge amount of multiples to the projection element, right? So when we project a wide receiver that's coming from Baylor into the league, we probably know he's going to play wide receiver, right? Like there's a couple gadget guys and things like that, but in the end, he's probably going to play that position. I mean, when you leave high school and you are let's say, offensive or defensive lineman, right? Where you lined up in that high school formation and where you may line up in 2 years, depending on how your body grows and your strength and your association and your footwork and ability to understand, different schemes and techniques, it could totally deviate. It's really a guesswork and a projection from the recruiting person to get that person off of a high school field and into a college lineup to be one of the people that plays and starts and impacts the game. And so that variability, that versatility to that skill set, there's probably going to be a lowering of that quotient from a standpoint of guaranteed dollars because, again, there's a good chance that skill set projected is not that skill set that's functioned, right? And so universities are going to want to take a good look at that spilt milk where we projected this guy as, let's say, a 5-star tackle, and really he needs to be inside. He's not a tackle at the next level. He's probably a guard. And so then that changes the value, to your point, on what that looks like. So in my mind, I think that you want to guarantee student athletes some sum of money for their services and for them participating in an amazingly profitable business. However, you want to do that with a common sense fiscal, responsibility that can hopefully allow for the repeatability of the business to continue. Because again, if you pay guys, let's say a couple $1 million to play left tackle and he's there 6 months and then he leaves and he ends up being a guard, the ROI on that is just not consistent. So that type of a business is going to have a tough time.
Last thing I'll ask you before I let you go, because I know you've got a lot today. There, in the NFL, there was a time, and you were in the league when this happened, where I think of Sam Bradford all the time. Sam Bradford got picked number 1 overall before he put on shoulder pads and a helmet for the Rams. They gave him $50 million, and the veteran players kind of got mad at this because they were, hey, look, I appreciate that, but I was a 4th-round pick. I'm now the best safety in the league, but you're telling me there's no money because of this guy? No. Hold on here. I think I'm wondering when that swing comes with recruiting, especially now that you add revenue sharing and the house settlement into this, where, you might get a little signing bonus for coming to Alabama to play quarterback. But before we start throwing the big cash at you, you got to throw some touchdown passes, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I would say this too. One of the most, I always encourage people that are learning about sports, one of the most informational or informing documents in any league is the collective bargaining agreement. Like if you, sometimes it can get dry if you're reading it all at one time, but if you really want to learn about the structure of something, reading the collective bargaining agreement is so informative to the rules of how everything operates. And to your point, there was a shift from the rookie pay scale being heavier on the signing bonus and the guarantees to the veteran salary pool or salary cap being most of the allotment for the funding for those veteran players. And listen, you could argue which one's better, and that would probably be a whole podcast full. But I think in the end, I will say this: the collective bargaining agreement of every major sport is the North Star for how things operate. People create systems off of that. They create, obviously, flowcharts in their organizations because of the needs of the CBA. And in my opinion, some document like that governing the above college athletics will be a blessing to all. I was laughing this morning. I heard something about the college football playoff changing their bye structure, right? The teams that get a bye.
Yeah.
And I saw in one of the fine prints that everybody has to agree in order to have the structure change to the college football playoff. So again, getting Boise State's AD or whoever the AD is that enjoyed that bye to change and say, well, we don't want to buy. I would say that's probably not happening. So again, I think that the CBAs of all of these major sporting organizations, leagues, they govern, they really do, and they have every I dotted and every T crossed. And so while I don't think unions are necessary in this case, I do believe there needs to be a governing document and a governing body that steps in on behalf of the country, really, and hopefully creates very organized structure. And then it can be edited, right? Just like any CBA is edited, just like any ongoing legislation is edited. But I think that launch, I think, will help. So if we can get this case behind us, pay out people who have, are owed money, and then reset, I think the future of college sports is going to be really fun to be a part of and watch.
I agree with you. By the way, that Boise State AD, his name's Jeremiah Dickey. He's a good friend of mine. And I promise you, he will, he would hold out until the end before he's like, hey, whoa. We're not just going to capitulate. I know him well enough. Look, we got to get something coming back here if we're just going to give you the buyback, if we're not going to get it automatically. No. Yeah, I know that's going to happen. Jack Easterby, been a pleasure to meet you. A pleasure to talk to you. This has been great, educational. I know that our viewers are going to love it. Appreciate it. Happy New Year, and thanks for hopping on with us.
Okay, you guys too. Hope you're best in 25.
That's Jack Easterby. This is 365 Sports.